indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Rather than our words of inspiration, as you know, in TLUC, we have an excerpt from the Book of Useless Information. So tonight, let's talk about phobias. Acrophobia is a fear of heights. Tobey Maguire from the Spider-Man movies has acrophobia. Ataxophobia is a fear of disorder. Soccer pro David Beckham liked to have things in order, matching, and in even numbers. His wife said that if there were 3 cans of Coke on the counter, he'd throw one out to make sure there were only 2. Aviophobia is a fear of flying. I just don't understand this one. This common fear keeps many stars on the ground, including John Madden, Colin Farrell, Aretha Franklin, and Jennifer Aniston. Claustrophobia, fear of enclosed spaces. Uma Thurman said it will reduce her to screaming if she gets locked in a closed space. Chlorophobia is a fear of clowns. Johnny Depp has a fear of clowns. Pretty interesting, given recent events. Comatrophobia, a fear of graveyards. When filming Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Sarah Michelle Gellar requested a fake cemetery be built because of her phobia. Hoblophobia is a fear of guns. And although he's played James Bond many times, Roger Moore has a real fear of guns. And hydrophobia, fear of water. Even when all the time she spent in the water on Baywatch, Carmen Electra is afraid of the water. And the final one is misophonia, which is an irritation or anger over body noises. And anyone who has ever eaten food or drunk a glass of water next to Chair Randall will know that Chair Randall has raging misophonia. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We really will try and keep this as expeditious as possible. These are 3 good items, 2 information items, and an action item. I'd like to call to order the June 22nd, 2022 Transportation and Land Use Committee meeting. This room has a hearing loop. If you need hearing assistance, switch your hearing aids to telecoil mode. If you need a headset, we have those available as well. Please see the clerk to request one. Let's do 3-minute rounds for the discussion tonight, and we'll do the 2 information items and probably take a 20-minute break for dinner. If we're on a roll and everybody agrees, we can roll right through that and have dinner at the end, but we'll play that by ear. I received an anonymous complaint from Supervisor Glass that she wants the hamburgers to come back, and several people on the staff have echoed that sentiment, so we'll have potbelly tonight, but from now on we'll have hamburgers. And with that, I think we will go to the update on the Chapter 2 zoning ordinance rewrite. Staff, anytime.
I didn't get a vote on the hamburgers, which I don't want.
That's correct. That's a correct observation. You did not get a vote.
Good evening, Chairman Turner and committee members. I'm Judy Burkett with the Department of Planning and Zoning. I have with me this evening Kate McConnell, who drafted much of the zoning ordinance, including Chapter 2 zoning districts, and interim Director of Planning and Zoning, Joe Crobeth.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have this presentation in our...
I don't believe we do. I don't think we do.
don't.
So we will wing it. Go for it. We'll follow down there.
Okay, the 90-day public comment period, as you know, is underway and continues through July the 18th. We have received about 350 comments from the public, including comments from organizations like NAIOP, the Commercial Real Estate Development Association. We do take all comments very seriously and treat them with the same level of scrutiny, whoever submits them, whether it's an organization or an individual. We have reviewed the letter from NAIOP, and in many cases, we agree with their comments and are planning to make adjustments for the second release of the zoning ordinance that comes out in mid-August prior to the Planning Commission public hearing. As you can see from the milestones on the screen, the Planning Commission public hearing is tentatively scheduled for August 30th, followed by work sessions September, October, and early November. And we are planning to have the draft zoning ordinance to the board, the full board, in December or January. This evening, we're providing you an early look at Chapter 2, Draft Zoning Districts. And on the screen is a draft zoning district map that's a companion to the draft text. We're asking for your high-level initial feedback and direction to ensure that we're going in the right direction. A primary goal of the zoning ordinance rewrite is to implement the general plan. So we've grouped zoning districts by general plan policy areas. So districts are grouped by urban policy area, suburban, transition, rural, and joint land management area. We've taken 4 general different approaches to grouping zoning districts, and I'd like to talk you through the 4 of those. Districts are generally renamed, unmapped, consolidated, or legacy. So first, let's start with districts that are renamed. Most of the draft new zoning districts originate from a zoning district that you see in the current zoning ordinance. Largely, the zoning districts have been renamed and revised to align with the place type in the general plan. Zoning district names largely mirror the place type names in the general plan, and that was intentional to clearly show which place type a zoning district is implementing. We do have some examples on the screen. I won't read through them, but you can see how they do align with the general plan and originate from an existing zoning district. Next, we have 6 new unmapped zoning districts. And what we mean by unmapped is no land in the county is currently zoned as one of these zoning districts. For a property to be zoned one of these districts in the future, the property owner would need to submit a zoning map amendment application requesting to be rezoned to one of these districts. The first 5 were created to implement a place type in the general plan that did not correlate to a current zoning district in the revised 93 zoning ordinance. The last one, the planned development zoning district, is a district that's intended to provide an option for a wholly negotiated development scheme.
Can I, Ms. Burkett, can I just interject here? I probably will do this more than once.
That's fine.
This gets really confusing, TLEC members. So when you look at this, there is no zoning district suburban mixed use right now. There is a place type in the comprehensive plan that's suburban mixed use, but there is no zoning district. There will be a new zoning district, suburban mixed use, correct, Ms. Burkett?
There will be a zoning district that someone could rezone to.
Two,
Yes.
suburban mixed use, correct.
Correct.
Right. So kind of follow along, but what they're trying to do is match the zoning ordinance rewrite with the place type designations in the comprehensive plan. Right now, the zoning ordinance is radically different than the comprehensive plan. Okay? Thank you.
You're welcome. The next category is consolidated zoning districts. So we did look at opportunities to consolidate zoning districts. And you'll see that largely those are the planned development office park and planned development industrial park zoning districts. And we've consolidated and renamed those to suburban employment. If it's in joint land management area, it's combined in JLMA Leesburg employment, and in the transition area, PDOP and PDIP are renamed transition light industrial. But that was our initial attempt at consolidating zoning districts. We're continuing to look for opportunities to consolidate more. The last section is legacy districts, and this is a little bit confusing because it's a new concept, but we've identified 16 current zoning districts as potential legacy districts, and there's 2 primary reasons you might have a legacy district. First, the district could have been created through a proffered rezoning, and an example of that is the Planned Development Active Adult Age Restricted Zoning District. Another example is the permitted density in the current zoning ordinance could be higher than what's envisioned in the general plan by the place type. So we didn't want to take away zoning that allowed a higher density. So we've retained the zoning district as a legacy district to implement the current zoning or the proffered rezoning. Legacy districts are intended to phase out over time. And for that reason, the way we've drafted the zoning ordinance is they would not be permitted to expand or come in to be modified through a zoning concept plan amendment. We don't want to get too deep into the legacy district map, but I wanted you at least to see it. The different colors are scattered, throughout, and it's showing what the 16 zoning districts are. But I want you to not be misled by the PDH zoning districts, which are all of the yellow, the beige, and then the gold, because really what we're doing there is retiring the concept of planned development housing. Those are always confusing because they're administered as another district. So we're retiring the PDH concept, and then the underlying zoning districts will be renamed to a new district. I know that's a lot of information, but we're here to answer your questions and get your input.
Thank you very much. Let's start with questions. Supervisor Glass, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Chairman Turner. And thank you for explaining this to us. I have a few questions. So in Table 1, Suburban Neighborhood 6, is that 6 units per acre?
Yes, 6 units per acre.
It is. How would we determine density in the new unmapped districts in Table 1? Would the density of parcels be determined during the rezoning process?
Yes, it would be determined during the rezoning process. There is a maximum in each of those districts, but then typically during the rezoning process, there may be a commitment to either the maximum or something less.
Okay. So in Table 2, is the suburban commercial community center more of a, is it more of a strip mall zoning type? And the planned development regional center, is that more of a larger mall type facility?
Generally, the suburban commercial community center is intended to be a little more, maybe more pedestrian oriented than you would think of as a strip mall. So maybe buildings closer to the street, not a large parking lot with the buildings kind of at the back of the parking lot. But it is intended to be a smaller commercial center for a neighborhood, whereas, as you noted, the pedestrian or the planned development regional center would be that larger mall type facility.
Okay. And so I'm referencing Table 2. Are the ZOC and staff, are they comfortable with combining zoning districts such as PDIP and PDOP to make suburban employment? I ask this because when I hear those names, I naturally think of industrial and office use, and those are different uses. So I want to make sure that we're not allowing inappropriate industrial uses to be allowed where office park are previously zoned.
Right. Over time, both of those districts have had so many uses added to them that they both allow a lot of uses. And so we decided to consolidate those because they're really getting at that overall employment concept of the suburban employment. PDGI, general industry, is the district where their really heavy industrial uses are. So one thing we are doing is making sure that if there are any of those PDIP uses that are permitted and they are kind of more impactful than the other districts, they will retain a larger setback.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Karcher.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you guys for coming tonight. I know it should not go unnoticed. This is a lot of work. I mean, I could do it in overnight. I mean, but otherwise, no, I'm just teasing. It's tremendous amount of work, and it's impressive. And I know we're only at the tip of the spear here. There's a lot more to go with Planning Commission and everything else. So your work doesn't go unrecognized. And I know your office, as Joe well knows, has been a little understaffed because of some transition turnover. So. Quite honestly, I mean, I read through the item. I didn't read everything in every single policy area. I'm still kind of digging into it, but I did have some general questions at your presentation. First of all, you made a comment in your presentation, and I think in here, you said there's 350 comments approximately so far. Do you know how that's broken down by policy area? Any comments or suggestions within the rural policy area, since there wasn't a lot of changes? I'm just wondering what kind of feedback you're getting there.
We're still getting a lot of feedback in Western Loudon, really.
About Western Loudon or about Eastern Loudon?
Western Loudon,
Okay.
a lot of comments, and that's where so minimal changes are being
Right.
made. Yeah.
And I read through the rural stuff, and I'm like, this really hasn't changed a whole lot. So, okay. If there is anything, please certainly keep us updated. Could you go back to the slide on the unmapped districts that you talked about? I just want to make sure I understand that. So I think we had a little brief discussion. My understanding of these are that there is no policy area for the, well, there's no, I guess there's policy area, but there's no zoning district, that these will actually exist. But if someone came and wanted to rezone a piece of property, they could choose one of these as a possible to rezone it to. Is that what these mean by unmapped? So we'll never see these on a map unless someone actually comes in for rezone.
Correct, that's correct, because these are correlating to a place type. So it's a vision in the general plan, so someone could come in and rezone to one of these, yes.
Okay, and yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, I really like the, again, I'm still delving into it, but all the consolidation. Can you talk to me about a little bit about the methodology that you used and how you went about saying, hey, we're going to consolidate all these zoning districts into this one? I know I'm sure there was a lot of talk about this and how you decided it.
Really, it was based on the uses. I mean, their PDRDP is a district that's been in the county for quite some time, and it's not very much exists, and the uses are very similar to PDOP. Okay. Again, uses very similar to IP. There are some differences, and we do need to make sure that when those uses are allowed, there's we're still protecting neighboring properties. But in general, it was the fact
just
that
a
those
general
uses are kind of
categorization.
Pardon me?
It's just a general categorization in terms of those kind of large categories, and then you have the subcategories after that. Is that how I'm understanding it? Just because you fall into, we consolidated all these zoning districts, do they have all the same rules, or do you still break it down by subcategory?
Okay, I see what you're saying. We did, primarily we retained, it depends, but in some cases we retained for instance, we retained the highest density permitted.
Okay.
Because we weren't trying to decrease anyone's density.
I see.
We did, but then at the same time, we retained the smallest setback because PDOP has the least setback. But that's why we're talking about how there may be some uses that need to have a bigger setback because they were the ones that were allowed in IP that have a little more impact.
Okay.
So we typically tried to not make it more restrictive.
Okay, great. My time's up.
Chair Rindle.
Thank you. Chair Turner, do you mind if I call Mr. Yudd, if you would allow Mr. Yudd to come down to the table?
Sure.
Mr. Yudd, could you come to the table, please?
What did Mr. Yudd do?
I just like Mr. Yudd, that's all. Just like him, just my friend. So I think I am the only supervisor.
I'm here.
Because you're never in the room with us anymore. So I'm the only supervisor who's on the dais right now that was here last year. And last year when we got the comp plan, last term when we got the comp plan, we had 90 days to complete it. So we were in like a rush, and there's a lot of things that we found in this term that had we had more time last term when we received the comp plan, we would have dove into a little bit more. I'm looking at you all at the timeline that you just gave us on page 2, and it's a little different than the timeline that you and I had discussed, Mr. Yudd. And truthfully, I like the timeline that you and I had discussed a little bit more because this timeline feels fairly rushed. And don't get me wrong, one, I think this is an amazing amount of work, and thank you so much. And two, I don't want to belabor this point more than it has to be belabored either. Gosh knows I want this done as soon as possible. But this is a really tight timeline. And so one, I'm going to ask, is this realistic? Because I don't want you all to feel too rushed. And two, I'm going to just relate the timeline I had before. And I may have gotten it wrong, so if I did, tell me that that it would be in PC public hearing by the end of August. The planning commissioner should have it out by September, and this was the important part. The staff will begin to prepare it for the BOS by giving us individual briefings, which is really going to be important, I think, individual briefings. And we would get it in probably late November, and it would be completed in total in between March and June of '23. I'm going to go back to the individual briefing parts because there is no way we're going to be able to understand all of this completely, all the acronyms, all the new zoning. We just, I mean, it's just too much. I mean, you all, this is your careers, your jobs, and you all with the ZOC help write it. We're going to do our best to dive deep, but it's still going to be a lot for us to get by, you know, but by late 2022, I don't think we can have this and have it go to a Board of Supervisors public hearing. I know that I'm going to need more time than that. And I guess I'm asking, is this timeline because you all feel like you need to get it out? Or is it, I mean, tell me how this, because it's a new timeline. Tell me how we got here. Because I don't want to do anything to impede what you, because you all got more stuff to do. Y'all got to get on to other things. At the same time, I want to know that I know to the best of my ability what we're voting on when it's time to pass it.
It is an aggressive timeline, and we're trying to work with your overall work program for the spring,
Okay.
as well as our internal ZOAM work plan and CPAM work plan.
Okay.
But what I didn't put on the screen is, the public hearing would be, December, January, but then the board would have committee of the whole or TLUC meetings and all of those one-on-one briefings that you need, after the first of the year. We would not expect you to take action in December or January. You could take as much time as you needed. If we need to take a break for budget season, we could do that.
Oh, let's not do that. But yeah, so that really helps because I will tell you, I can't speak for anybody else, but I am going to want, I'm sure, more than one briefing, right? It's like, this is a lot, and this is new. We've not seen this before. Mm-hmm. And to that point, if I'm looking at page 3 on the presentation, there's a whole new chart of acronyms that are completely new to us. And I did try, you try to match the acronyms to the staff report, and really I couldn't. I'm so out of time. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. I am way out of time. My bad. Okay, we'll go back around. You know what, Caleb? You know what? I am really. I'm really sorry. I am really, really sorry.
Thank you. I want to follow up on. I want to follow up on the chair's comments because I was going to ask this question later on, but I'd like to walk through it conceptually as I understand the process. So eventually you're going to finish the first draft. You've got all the comments. I think we're in July sometimes when we wrap up the public comment period, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then, and ZOC has gotten a chance to weigh in. So then you will go to the Planning Commission. Presumably the Planning Commission will send it to multiple work sessions. It'll come back out of the work sessions. It'll go to a public hearing. The Planning Commission will make a vote and recommend it to us. It will come to the Board of Supervisors. Now, the only logical way I can see this happening is for the board to mirror the Planning Commission process. So the board gets it, thank you very much, they hand it off to TLUC. TLUC goes into a series of work sessions, probably not one session per chapter, but you guys can break that out however you want to. Then TLUC is going to have to get very smart on the new zoning ordinance to be able to make informed recommendations. And then I was thinking probably the best way to release this to board is sequentially. So we view, say, chapter 2, we work however many work sessions we need for chapter 2, and then we come up with a final recommendation. You consolidate that, and we send it to the Board of Supervisors to consider chapter 2. Is it your anticipation that the board would vote a chapter at a time, or would they get it, review it, and have it, and then wait until all the chapters have been recommended by TLUC and vote the entire ordinance in one evening? Or should the TLUC get the entire ordinance modified to its desires and then hand the whole thing off to the Board of Supervisors, which is an awfully big bite to chew on for the Board of Supervisors? I'm just interested in your thoughts.
I think it's a great idea to do it in small bites, but ultimately you would have one overall vote on the overall zoning ordinance. But we can work with you whatever works best for you.
Okay, and I mean, we could theoretically, we just take straw poll votes on each chapter on the
Exactly.
board, so we've got it, and then we just make it official in the single final vote for the entire document.
Yes.
Okay, to be determined, but it speaks, I think, to the chair's point that this is an awful lot of information, and the TLUC is going to have to take the lead on behalf of the board to really understand what it is we're talking about. So we're going to have to be experts here. I think I have enough time. I think I understand this really quickly. On page 30 of the actual report, chapter 2, the very first two lines, it's a suburban employment zoning district. It says, the purpose of the suburban employment zoning district is to implement the suburban employment place type and the suburban mixed-use place type. And I really did a double take on that because I thought, wait a minute, we're mixing apples and oranges here. But then I just realized in the conversation, we're talking about place types. Right now, the place types have PDIP, PDOP, PDRDP. So we're combining all of those PDIPs, OPs, and RPs under suburban employment, correct?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
that's what I thought. Thank you. Next round, Supervisor Glass.
Thank you. So I'm referencing Table 3. Will all current residential zoning districts remain as legacy districts? And will property owners have to apply to rezone to one of the new unmapped districts in Table 1?
No, the only residential legacy zoning districts are R1, 2, and 3. That's 1 dwelling units per acre, 2 dwelling units per acre, 3 dwelling units per acre.
Okay.
The residential districts SN 4 and 6 and SCN 8, 16, and 24 are essentially those R districts with that density, but aligned with the place types in the comprehensive plan, the suburban neighborhood and the suburban compact neighborhood. So they will be essentially renamed to that new district or remapped to that new district. And then the legacy districts are the ones that would stay at that lower density. And if someone did want to rezone to a higher density, they would have to request a rezoning.
Okay, and I'm getting a little confused. So was looking at Table 3 in the packet, and it says legacy districts are envisioned to be phased out over time. But I don't see a community like Ashburn Village being rezoned to a new district, because that would involve thousands of people, thousands of owners. So
I'm not sure what zoning district Ashburn Village is in, but if it's at a PDH. When Judy was talking about the last slide with the PDH zoning districts, that's a kind of an overarching district, and there are, I don't know how to explain it other than there's kind of underlying zoning districts that are implementing that PDH district. So we say, for instance, PDH4 administered as R4. So there would be a section that's R4, so that would just be renamed to SCN4.
Okay.
SN4. Does that help
That
answer your
helps.
question? Okay.
That helps.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Kirshner.
So just
This
on
light wasn't even on.
yours hasn't gone off. Just like your time. So, sorry. We're a little punch happy from last night. I think we were up till 2 o'clock. Real quick on the process. So do we think the Planning Commission can actually get this? I mean, they're going to get this, I think I read in here August 30th. I think you mentioned it too. They're going to get this August 30th. As the chair said, they're probably going to have several work sessions. Do we actually think they're going to be able to work through this? Are they going to have multiple work sessions and not just their normal monthly meeting? Is that the idea?
We've already scheduled one additional meeting each month for the Planning Commission. So they'll have one meeting a month completely dedicated to the zoning ordinance, and their normal meeting will tack on to it, the regular agenda. And they've already been informed that there's a possibility for an all-day Saturday work session if that's needed.
Okay, so they get to feel our budget pain a little bit. I got it. Okay, that's good to know. because to me, I feel like, and I really like the plan that Mr. Turner brought up in terms of the way we're going to perhaps handle it here at the board level, but I feel like a lot of the heavy lifting, because I'm going to be working with my planning commissioner pretty closely as they go through that process, so I'm more familiar, and I would encourage all board members who are going to be to talk to their planning commissioner so they can be more up to speed by the time we get here, familiar with the acronyms, et cetera. I think that'll really help the process. So that's good to know. On the legacy districts, just make sure I understand this. These are districts that currently exist, or these are zoning districts that currently exist, but the density is actually higher than the general plan. Is that right? And so therefore,
Yes,
we're going
in
to
some
create
cases.
legacy districts. So you won't be able to rezone to this,
Right.
but they will exist so that you can do what you had previously within that district.
That's exactly right. We don't want to take anything away.
I appreciate that. And this says potential. I'm assuming your plan is to put this in the initial drafts, but we don't know what's going to happen. Is that why we're calling it potential?
Right, that's our plan. That we've come up with 16 potential legacy districts so far. We don't know what the zoning ordinance committee's ultimate recommendation is going to be. They could recommend more or fewer, and staff could also find some other districts to add to legacy districts. So it could be a little bit different when it gets to the planning commission and again to the board.
Okay. Drilling down just a little bit on those, I noticed that we have transitional residential under the 2019 general plan. Okay, wait, maybe I'm reading this table incorrectly, but you're calling it is it crossed from each other, or these are just, you have the place type and then you have the draft zone district. So now it's being called agricultural residential, which is the A3. Is that right? That's going to be, it's at the very bottom of table 3. Yes, agricultural residential.
It's actually a list with 2 columns, so
I see.
it's
Okay,
not.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
So they're not related. Okay,
Right.
I was misreading that. Okay, that's all my questions. I'm out of time. I'll stop on time.
Madam Chair?
Oh, Mr. Kirchner. So I'm actually not even going to try to dive down into all the definitions yet, because it's so early, and I know things can change. I'm not going to get a definition in my head that can later on change. So, and if you look on page of the presentation, page 2 and page 5, and then you compare it back to the staff report, I was having a hard time following the actual definitions of the zoning districts. And so, and just forget the acronyms altogether. It might be helpful, well, let me change that. It will be helpful for me if the definitions that are going to convert to the zoning districts that are on page 5, if I could have some clear definitions of what those are, what that means. So transition compact neighborhood, TCN, what does that exactly mean? That would be helpful for me for when I get ready to get there. That would be helpful for me when I get ready to get there. And I do understand what you said to me before about that, we have this board that's been active. And so there's been a lot coming in, trying to get through as much as you possibly can by the end of our term, quite frankly. And I do understand that. I do really appreciate that. But I also appreciate that I will probably need and would appreciate a couple of individual sessions just to go through things. So again, I need to get to the end of the time and know that I'm comfortable with what I'm voting for. And I can't say that was true for the comp plan, even though we worked really hard on it, but only because we had no choice. Our time was what the time is of the state. So I just want to make sure I got it all correct. So thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to yield back 54 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank all of you and the entire staff that's been working on this for a couple of years now. I really like the way this lays out. Now, I tried to read as much detail as I could, and obviously it's pretty daunting. But I like the way it's laid out. It's intuitive. It's easy to understand. I can't imagine what the current 1,000-page zoning ordinance looks like, and this just lays out very nicely. I also, they had a function tonight, but I'm hoping that some reps from NAIOP are watching. I really appreciated the letter. And I'm really pleased to hear that you like a lot of what they had to suggest and that you're taking that into account. I think that was really helpful and very much appreciated, so thank you, Naya. A little bit of a lightning round here. I noticed in suburban neighborhood, I don't know why this jumped out at me, but we've reduced the front yard setback in suburban neighborhood to 15 feet, and I think the current setback is a standard 75 feet. Did we in fact reduce setback to 15 feet in suburban neighborhood with some intent in mind? Because that seems awfully short for a suburban neighborhood.
I am not recalling that the current front yard is 75 feet, but we did in general reduce the yard requirements. And what we did was in the current zoning ordinance in the ADU program, when a property provides ADUs, they have some other different development standards in Chapter 7. And we thought, well, the intent of those is to make property development more affordable because the lots don't have to be as big, the yards don't have to be as deep. So we simply implemented those into the zoning districts that had those ADU development standards. So there are yards that are reduced, but they are yards that we've been implementing in the county since we've had the ADU program.
Okay. I want to make sure I understand this correctly because this has real implications here. So when you create the suburban employment zoning designation, the zoning district, and you roll all of the PDOPs, PDIPs, PDRDPs, PDTCs, all of those under suburban employment, I'm assuming that all of the permitted uses under each one of those current zoning districts roll in the aggregate under suburban employment, and that everything that's now suburban employment immediately inherits all of those combined permitted uses under all the underlying current zoning districts. Did I say that right? Because suddenly, if you've got a list of permitted uses that has an 80% overlap, and you combine them all under suburban employment, now everybody has 120% permitted uses.
The way we address that is we have a lot of permitted / special exception. And so it refers us to another chapter of development standards that explain what would trigger a certain use, what intensity or what characteristics would trigger a special exception for a particular use. And that way it's not absolutely permitted across the board, but in certain cases a special exception might be required. So we can't say we 100% put all the uses, and just consolidated them all, because that's not exactly what we did. We tried to take into consideration what parameters might trigger the need for a special exception.
I'm going to take the chair's 54 seconds here really quickly. It jumped right out of my head. I'll come back.
That's what you get. That's what you get. That's
All
what
right,
you, that's
next
what you
round. Supervisor Last. Madam Chair. Okay, good, then I'll keep going. In suburban neighborhood, we do not apply the 6 criteria to infill, and as I understand it, if I read it correctly, infill is now defined as any piece of land within suburban neighborhood, maybe not within suburban neighborhood, but certainly between 5 and 25 acres, correct, is infill.
It's correct. It might be the 20. I know I've said it in the TLUC meetings where we discussed there was a difference in the plan between the 20 or the 25. So I'll have to kind of follow that CPAM.
Yeah, I saw 25
Okay.
in the Chapter 2 draft, and I just assumed we'd incorporate it, but maybe it's still in 2 different places, but whatever. We have not incorporated the 6 criteria and applied them to infill, but TLUC, I think, just recommended to the board that we apply the 6 criteria to infill parcels. So it's not reflected here. Is the intent to eventually reflect the 6 criteria and apply them to infill?
I believe so. I think I'd have to talk to Randall about that and also identify whether that CPAM needs to be adopted first, and then we could incorporate it into the zoning ordinance.
Okay. And then along those lines, the cluster guidelines within Chapter 2, the draft Chapter 2, appear to be the same cluster rules that we're living under right now. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's a different ZOAM.
Okay, and that was my next question is, then that's a separate ZOAM, and when that ZOAM is approved in whatever form that it's in, it'll be incorporated into the new zoning ordinance?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
got it. Can we do that? Can we approve a ZOAM to a zoning ordinance rewrite that hasn't been approved yet?
Well, it would be amending the current zoning ordinance, and then we could take those zoning
Fold it over
regulations
into
and
the
fold
new-
them into
okay,
this
got it.
one. Yes.
I think that is all my questions. It is. One more round. Anybody need anything? Any questions? Anything that we did not answer for you? I think this is really early in the process. And I always feel like we are leaving you without insufficient information to continue on. So please pipe up if there's anything you want.
Mr. Chair, I will jump in because Chair Randall did bring up the schedule, the general schedule discussion. And so if you look at what the staff prepared in the item, I think the best way to characterize it is they're providing their best estimate at this point in time of the timeline necessary to move forward. We also know that there's some external issues that we'll need to deal with. As various groups look at the drafts, they have position statements similar to what NAIOP provided recently. Planning Commission has to provide their approach and recommendation. And then we also have a public component of this for not just the public hearing and the testimony at the public hearing, but the reaction to public notice when we put that out for the required public hearings. So dealing with individuals and their perceptions of what uses they can have on their property from experience does cause some additional time. And so I think at this point in time, we're trying to give you the best estimate of what it would take, but dealing with all of those issues and then getting more specific into the deeper dives that you will want to take moving forward, answering your questions through the briefings that you will want to have, will require an extra level of effort. And that's not even to mention what is in the staff report as the issue regarding where we end up or where you end up with data center uses. And so all of those are moving parts right now. So that description of possible time frame is an approximation, and then how you choose to deal with those externalities will affect the timeline. I think we also need to perhaps give you some options in terms of, well, if you move forward, but you encounter some issues that are very difficult, could we put those to the side in a bin list or to be dealt with later? Is that an approach that might work to still stay close to a reasonable timeline? So I just bring that up because those issues will be upon us shortly, and we will need to advise you of those and then get your more specific direction on those.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yep.
How would a bin list to be done later work, Mr. Yudd?
We did that in the revised 93, and either these issues could not be dealt with in the project, so they had to remain as outstanding items that couldn't be dealt with, which went ahead and did the remapping and the ordinance amendments, or they came in subsequent zoning ordinance amendments that were discrete and focused on those later. And so the bin list would be just, okay, if you can't keep going this way now, what could you either bifurcate from the process totally or deal with later as a separate amendment? Yeah. And you will know that as we've gone through the work program discussions with you, sometimes there's an emphasis to pull into the zoning ordinance rewrite, pull this amendment or that one in. Mm-hmm. We may be at the point where we say, to continue with this project, we pull X out.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's.
I can definitely see the pros and cons of both of those, of that, depending on how the time looks. I can definitely see the pros and cons of that. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have a quick question, Mr.
Yeah.
So we're obviously dealing with Chapter 2 zoning districts. How many other chapters will we need to deal with as part of this process? Or is everything, there's more to combine, I mean, some of your standards and whatnot in other chapters, correct?
Right. The last early look we're planning is for the next TLUC meeting, and that's on development standards. And that's so broad with environmental and parking. It's pretty heavy.
Okay, so we've got some heavier stuff even than that, okay, fair enough.
Is there a chapter on permitted uses? I assumed there was as I was reading this, but now I've got some question as to if there's a permitted uses chapter.
There's a chapter on uses with use tables. It was the first chapter we brought to TLUC. It's been several months at this point, and Mr. David was with us, and he presented that one.
Okay.
Chapter 3, yep.
Back to your comment that you've gotten a lot of comments on Western Loudoun County. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but based on other conversations I've been having over the last several months, my bet is, I would be willing to bet, that a lot of those comments are basically, what's the nicest way I can put this? Misinformed attempts to change the zoning rather than bring the zoning ordinance into alignment with the comprehensive plan. So that the suggestions relate to, this shouldn't be zoned this way, it should be zoned this way, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, this is currently zoned this way and the plan says this, we need to bring these into alignment. Is that a fair characterization, or are they all over the map?
Well, a lot of them are about wineries and breweries,
Right.
the intensity of certain events. A lot of them are trying to rehash the comprehensive plan for rural Loudon, and that's not our charge. So we just need to make that very clear in the public hearings and in the staff reports going forward.
Right. And then lastly, and we can move on to the next item. I want to put all the TLUC members on notice. The staff and the ZOC and the Planning Commission are putting just a gargantuan amount of work into this process. I can easily foresee, as we get towards the end of the year, a much more aggressive TLUC schedule other than one TLUC meeting a month. Just putting everybody on notice. I can see a subcommittee of 3, possibly developing meeting even weekly for a month or 2. I just want everybody to be aware, there's no paradigms in this process. This is too big an effort for TLUC not to stand up and say, we got to roll up our sleeves and dig in. We owe that fealty to the staff's work that they've done already. So I'm just putting that marker out there for the TLUC members that we may go to a pretty aggressive schedule in the end game of this whole process. Anything else from staff?
That's all on this item. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And could we have the team up for the next item, please? Good evening, everyone. You have the floor at your discretion.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'd like to introduce our panel today. I'm Nancy Boyd, Acting Director with DTCI. With me here is Susan Glass, Special Projects Manager, Penny Newquist, Assistant Director for Transit, Sarah Kleckner, and Sarah, I'm going to botch your title, so please add it for me now.
Transportation Planner.
Transportation Planner, and Scott Gross. And Scott, please tell me your title too, because I'm going to botch that. Forgive me.
Transit Division Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'll turn this over.
All right, so this item, the access to the Metro rail stations is really a two-prong item. The first part deals with the sidewalk and shared use path connections to the stations, and the second part deals with transit. So I'm going to speak on the first part, which is for the bicycle and pedestrian networks around the Loudon Gateway and Ashburn stations. And attachment 1 of this item, which is currently displayed on the screen, depicts segments that are being worked on by VDOT, the county, and developers. The VDOT Metro Rail Bicycle and Pedestrian Improvement Project is currently designing several segments, which are shown in purple and in orange. The purple is used to designate shared use path, and orange shows sidewalks. The board endorsed the location and design of those segments at its December 7th, 2021 business meeting. The county is also constructing segments of shared use path and sidewalk, either as part of the Sidewalk and Trails program or in conjunction with a road project. Those segments are shown in blue and green on the map, with blue to designate shared use path and green sidewalk. And finally, developers in the area are also constructing shared use paths and sidewalks, which are shown in red and yellow. And again, the red shows shared use path, yellow is for sidewalk. Some of those segments were proffered, and others are being constructed as part of a by right data center construction project. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have about these segments, and I will do my best to answer the questions tonight. Some of your inquiries may require me to do some follow-up research, and I'll have to get back to you.
All right, questions, Supervisor Glass?
Thank you, Chairman Turner, and thank you for coming out today to answer our questions. What is the reason or reasons, what are the reasons why the Shellhorn Road sidewalk being constructed by VDOT will not be completed until 2026?
Well, the main reason for that is the presence of an extensive amount of utilities, specifically mainly telecom facilities, which are serving the data centers that are located along Shellhorn and further down towards Loudon County Parkway.
Okay. Is there any way to expedite utility relocation specifically for this section? Or if we do something like allocate more money toward this particular project, this is a missing link that's located just a few thousand feet from the stairs of the station and will be a major problem as a missing segment for safe pedestrian use.
All right, so VDOT, as part of their project, packaged their segments into 3 distinct groupings, and they were doing them, I guess, based upon ease. So starting with Loudon County, or Route 606, the shared use path that's down there to serve the Loudon Gateway Station, the extension that's over the Greenway. That's the first one that they're working on. And they are trying to expedite as much as they can. I don't believe that throwing additional funds at the problem will solve it.
Okay. Well, I have another question. There are several missing links around Metro that aren't referenced in this item and not being constructed by the county developers or VDOT. How do we get work started on constructing those missing links as well?
Those missing links that you're referring to that are not showing up on this map are probably identified on the county's Sidewalk and Trails program, which I don't know how many links. There was probably several hundred that were identified. And there was a process that was developed to prioritize those segments, and groupings of them are being placed into the CIP to be designed and constructed each year.
Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Kirshner?
Thank you, Chair. So item was pretty self-explanatory, but there were some transit service issues that you kind of brought up in this item that I wanted to kind of follow up on. I think I'm looking at the right item. Yes. Specifically as to the challenges of CDL drivers.
I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Oh, we aren't? So we're splitting this?
We're just doing sidewalks. And
Never mind.
Okay, Chair Reynolds?
Want to make sure. I didn't realize we were splitting. I wondered why we didn't talk about it.
It's okay, it's okay.
Good listening there, Attorney Kirshner. Oh, man. Okay. So on page 7 of the item, and I know you guys know where I'm going to go with this question. You do mention the ADA accessibility, and that you're still working on the sidewalks and pedestrian paths, but you do say that not every bus stop location has them. Can you just give me an update? And I know I realize that we kind of acquired something, and this wasn't our doing, but is it possible I can get an update on where we are at and how far along we are with the effort to make our sidewalks, paths, and especially our curb cuts ADA compliant?
Sure.
Sure.
I'd be happy to address that. So this item is specifically referring to the new transit routes.
So everything will start with it, correct then?
Exactly. So
That
there's
is wonderful.
actually two concurrent efforts going on right now. One is related to taking our existing bus stops and bringing them into full compliance with ADA. And so we have a project that is ongoing to identify all of the different stops, what the compliance needs are, and then develop through a capital project improvements to bring those into compliance. So the design is underway with that effort. We're still several months out from being able to develop construction to be able to accommodate or to enter into construction activities to be able to implement some of those changes. But it is well underway. So that's our ADA compliance, our
So then
transition
the section
plan.
that says, however, comma, not every new bus stop location has a paved pedestrian pathway and the street curb. That is, we're not talking about the
existing.
we're talking about the existing.
No, these are the new. So this you're referring to page 7,
I am,
the paragraph, second paragraph from the bottom.
I am.
Yeah. So there's 175 ADA compliant landing pads. That's with respect to the new transit routes.
But because they're new, they are compliant.
Well, they're not. They don't exist yet. And so we have a project underway to. So we've surveyed all of the different bus stop locations, and so it's a little bit more involved than what the county has done in the past. So in the past, we haven't really identified a new transit route and needed to establish new fully compliant bus stop locations. So what's needed to be compliant is a landing pad. So the bus is compliant, and the bus needs a place to be able to put people down to be able to access different facilities. So, and then sometimes it also involves developing an accessible route, a sidewalk that will reach the landing pad. In many cases, the landing pad is immediately adjacent to a sidewalk, but in some cases, the sidewalk doesn't exist. And so sometimes it's those two parts. So in this case, for the new routes, we have an effort underway which has identified all of the different transit stop locations.
Okay.
The team has gone out, looked at all of those locations, actually adjusted where they are to be able to minimize needing new right-of-way, for example, minimize the effect or the potential implications of kind of grades to be able to make it as easily accessible as possible. And so there are about 3 different batches of different stops that the team is working on. One is just to get in and get those, the first third of them, the stops in place. There's a second batch of them that will need some right-of-way acquisition, and we have a team working to get that acquired under an expedited process right now. And then there's a kind of a third of them that we'll be able to get the landing pads in, and we'll need to come back later and finish the sidewalk connections. So we'll get the landing pad in, but we'll need to also to get the connections. Right. And so this is referring to kind of that complexity of getting those stops in.
Right. I understand. I understand what you just said. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'll keep my light on for another round.
Thank you. I know we have 3 separate entities trying to coordinate the missing links. Who decides, or do each of those entities decide on their own whether it's going to be a sidewalk or a shared use path?
Well, some of those segments that they're proffered, that's decided by the board's acceptance of the proffer during the rezoning application. We have the countywide transportation plan, which stipulates what type of facilities should be there. So that's the main driving forces.
Okay.
In some cases, as VDOT has moved forward with these segments, there's instances where, because of the constraints, they may reduce the width of a shared use path or something like that.
I asked a developer, and I know everybody knows this is my pet rock. A cyclist is not going to use the sidewalk in almost every case. I mean, there are times I'll go up on a sidewalk if I don't see anybody in any distance. But if there's any people at all on the sidewalk, I'm not going to go up on the sidewalk. I'm going to ride in the street. Down around Shellhorn, down by the metro station, that's dicey. That's a dicey proposition. And I specifically asked VDOT because they're putting in sidewalks across that shopping center leading into the metro station. That's their sidewalks. They're not shared use paths. I asked a developer, what's the difference in cost? He said they're about the same. If you put in a 10-foot wide shared use path versus a 5-foot wide sidewalk, you got 5 extra utility mapping feet that you've got to worry about. So that's going to add expense and it's going to add time. I understand that. As far as the actual cost goes, they said it's about the same in cost to lay an asphalt shared use path as it is sidewalk. The difference is 10 years later, you've got to upkeep the asphalt where you don't probably have to upkeep the concrete. So there's an added cost there. The reason I bring it up, and I've got a follow-on question that it's related to this, but I don't know why, and I'm continually baffled why we don't simply just lay down shared use paths and just get rid of sidewalks. Just get it out of our lexicon. It's so much more functional, and it's just not that more expensive. I think it's more aesthetically pleasing, and it just really simplifies the process. Even if you drop it from a 10-foot shared use path, which is the gold standard, down to a 6-foot shared use path. I can ride on a 6-foot shared use path and do every night. It's a little tricky, but I can do it. 8-foot is very acceptable. I can ride around pedestrians and dogs on an 8-foot shared use path just fine. And I am continually baffled that we constantly push ourselves down this paradigm of sidewalks that have such limited utility with so many people on bikes, especially down around the Ashburn metro station. The follow-on question is, and I don't mean that as a homework assignment, it's just, although I may, at some point, I would like to know the mechanism whereby we can just make the standard shared use paths in Loudoun County and just not even talk about sidewalks unless by exception. The follow-on, though, is who's coordinating all of the rights-of-way and utility mapping among VDOT, the county, and the private developers? Farmwell Road took the Farmwell corridor improvements took an inordinate amount of time because one entity mapped them for utilities and then either missed some or there was a miscommunication and another entity had to remap the utilities, which added a considerable amount of time to the project. So now we've got 3 entities involved, private, VDOT, and county. Who's coordinating all these right-of-way mapping exercises so we don't have to do them multiple times?
Well, Supervisor Turner, VDOT issues the permits for utilities to be installed in the right-of-way. And that has been an issue that has been a thorn in our side for quite a while. We are trying to get better in terms of coordinating that so that now when VDOT permits receives a request for a utility to install their facilities, they will send them over to our department. We did have a utility coordinator. We actually have 2 positions that are open for that at the moment. About to be filled. Okay, good news there. But it's an issue that we face and the developers face as well.
If there's anything the board can do to weigh in to help you with that process, please let us know, because I know that is a frustrating problem that we're dealing with on a regular basis. So if there's anything the board can do, bring it up and let's see what we can weigh on and try and accomplish. Next round, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So since some of the links that were previously being constructed by VDOT and the county are now being built by the developers, what can we take that money that has been opened up and use it to construct like the next priority of the missing links, or actually where does that money go to that we were going to use for those missing links?
So the funds that VDOT is using are federal funds, that's CMAQ and RSTP funding. And they're designated for the project. VDOT, as they're going through with each I'm going to call them batches because they have 3 batches. Right now they have a high-level cost estimate, and as they get closer to construction, that cost estimate will become more refined. Although it may look like, okay, we're pulling some segments out, so we should have extra money, I think we need to wait to evaluate that because costs are always rising. They're not going to go down.
Okay.
So there may be an opportunity. I don't want to shut the door on that, but we just need to be cautious in that
Okay.
thought.
All right, thank you.
Any other sidewalk or trail questions? Okay, I think we can talk transit. Thank you.
For the transit portion of this item on access to Metro Rail, I'll highlight where people can catch a bus going to Metro. Can you hear me? Loudon County Transit currently operates bus services to Metro Rail stations in Fairfax County. The expansion of the Silver Line into Loudon with new rail service at Ashburn Station and Loudon Gateway Station opened the door for redesign of our bus routes connecting to Metro Rail. With input from members of the Board of Supervisors and the public, we were able to shorten bus trip times, increase trip frequencies, expand the service hours, and extend the bus service into more neighborhoods, all while using our existing bus fleet. DTCI is currently in the process of designing and constructing approximately 175 new bus stops for these routes, complete with signs and ADA-compliant bus landing pads. This is what we were talking about before. But one thing we didn't mention is that along with that, there is complimentary ADA paratransit service that will be provided along each fixed route. Details of the service hours, frequencies, and service areas are provided as attachment 2 in your packet. Attachment 3 consists of the route data sheets for each route, and those identify each of the bus stop locations. The map on the screen is from attachment 4, and one thing I'd like to point out is that all current local bus routes will have at least one transfer point where a person could get on a bus going to the Metro Rail. I'll quickly identify the routes that include a stop at the Metro Rail. Starting from the west, we have Percival Harmony and the Leesburg routes going to Ashburn Station South Side. Also connecting to the Ashburn Station South Side are routes through Broadlands, Brambleton, Moorfield, and Westwind Farms. On the north side of Ashburn Station are routes through Ashburn Farm, Ashburn Village, and one Loudon via Quantum Park. Serving Loudon Gateway Station are the Stone Ridge and South Riding routes, and the Quantum Park Pacific Boulevard route, which is the current Route 990, 992. Crossing into Fairfax County, we're utilizing Innovation Center Station, which is east of the Dulles International Airport and was the most convenient metro for serving George Washington University and Dulles Town Center Park and Ride lot, as well as the Atlantic Boulevard connector, which replaces the current Route 84, and the Sterling route, which is an enhanced version of the current Route 985. Finishing out the list is the Potomac Falls route, which serves Reston Town Center on the north side. We're excited to serve these communities with bus service to Metro, as well as connect residents, employees, and visitors to Loudon's businesses, retail, and community centers. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about the routes.
Thank you. Supervisor Glass.
Thank you, Chairman Turner. So There are a couple of communities that I'm concerned that I don't see a bus route for, such as Kincora, which is off of Russell Branch, and the Ashburn Meadows apartments. How can we get these complexes onto a bus route?
Concora is a route, is a development that I was really looking at too early on. Some of the criteria when we were designing these routes is to continue to serve places that we were already serving,
Okay.
and then expand it to the areas that we could. We took a bus into Concora, and at the time that we were planning the routes, the road connections in there were not conducive to turning a bus around. So Concora is definitely one that we're going to continue to monitor of how we can serve that. And as we adjust our fleet, possibly looking at different bus sizes to go in there and redesigning that. But based on the criteria of making sure that we were serving all the areas that we were currently serving, I couldn't get the timing to make sense for that route. We were trying to keep the routes to about a 25-minute, 30-minute trip time. And a frequency of about 40 minutes with a couple of buses. And so I just couldn't make it work for this go-around.
Okay.
We're going to continue, excuse me, each year we'll analyze the routes and see where new developments are occurring and how we can make adjustments to them. I received a very similar question from a member of the public. And if I'm not mistaken, you'd have to correct me if I'm mistaken about the neighborhood, the other neighborhood that you mentioned. In addition.
Ashburn Meadows Apartments.
Okay, if that's the one I'm thinking of, it was along our Route 62, and so that currently does have a connection to a bus that goes to Metro Rail. If that's,
Okay.
I forget the name of the road. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, I have another question. If we do not have enough bus drivers hired, will there be routes that will be eliminated, or will there just be reduction in bus frequency on each route?
We are considering that, and I'll ask Scott to add additional information.
We fully anticipate that's going to happen. Our goal is to have at least one bus on every route when they start. We would like to keep the same time frames, meaning 5 a.m. in the morning to 11 p.m. in the evening. So we're in a wait and see mode right now to see how that plays out. Just so you understand it, once operational readiness is announced, our contractor is going to go full bore into hiring mode, and they've got to hire approximately 60 drivers to make that work.
Okay, thank you. And, well, I just wanted to mention that the Ashburn Meadows Apartments, those are off Gloucester Parkway.
Yes, I do believe that's along our Route 62. No? Oh,
Let us check on that and
Yeah.
get back to you on that.
Supervisor Kirshner.
So you mentioned operational readiness. I assume you were referring to the Metro.
Correct. Thank
You
you.
have a magic ball when that's going to be?
No, mine's broken.
Okay. Are we, last I had heard, we were anticipating September. Is that a realistic goal from what you guys are hearing on the ground?
We've heard different things for quite a long time. The latest
way of
I've
saying
heard is in any day now.
Okay.
Mr.
right.
Street may have the latest on this. There's a WMATA meeting
Same story, new rhetoric. I got it.
tomorrow,
Okay.
but
Any day now.
I think within the next few weeks, we're going to have the ORD announced.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. So obviously we're going to have a problem with drivers. We're seeing these kind of shortages all across the country. We're short on pilots. We're short. I got stuck in Toronto for 3 days a few days back, so that was a lot of fun. I didn't even get it to my destination. I just turned around. I'm concerned we're going to continue to have these. So you mentioned contingency plans in here. What are some of what are we doing here in Loudon, and what maybe can we do as a board, obviously, to help with these contingency plans in terms of once there is operational readiness, some of these stops open up, they're getting used more. How are we going to get these extra, I think you said 60 perhaps drivers that we may need?
I can tell you it's going to be a challenge. There is no silver bullet fix for this. What ends up happening every year is that one transportation jurisdiction bumps their rates up, and then the next one bumps their rates up, and the next one bumps their rates up. And when I say rates, they're hourly rates for their drivers. So
Right.
you're constantly chasing in this circle, and there's only a limited amount of folks out there. So
So there's a competitive market for bus drivers.
there is
right
a
now.
very competitive market for bus drivers right now.
Do we? I'm just curious. Do we have a going rate? Does it depend on
It
the road?
ranges between $20 and $25 an hour at this point.
Okay.
20 being the lowest for some of our jurisdictions, and 25 and change for the WMATA is the highest paying right now.
All right, that's good to know. So we're just it's really just a resource issue more than anything
Yes, sir.
in a free market competition issue. All right. Question. There was one other. Oh, something triggered. We just got done doing the kind of infill aspects, and obviously one of the criteria for doing some of these suburban infill areas is that they have access to a bus stop of some sort. How does that actually work in terms of you adding a new stop? If we have one of these new, does the developer come to you as a county, say, hey, we want to put one in, or how does that work, and how do you then fit that into your? I know it's not really part of the item, but it did occur to me. Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
I'll start off, Scott. We do coordinate with the transportation planning team in our office. They get referrals for new land development and share them with the transit team. We look at them for possible bus service, looking at where we have existing service or if we're likely to have new service in those areas. As far as like what we're looking for is, is it a roadway that you can take the bus on? And does it circulate somewhere? Or are you going to have to turn around? Is it safe for the pedestrian or for the bus to be able to stop and pick up a pedestrian? So we're looking at road speeds in those areas, whether or not we need to use turn lanes or be on the opposite side of an intersection. And also we're looking at, is there existing sidewalk? Does the application include providing a sidewalk for that new bus stop? So there are lots of factors that we're looking into. What is the connection? How safe is it? And whether or not there's enough demand to warrant adding a new bus stop.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. If I look at the map, and I'm looking at it correctly, the only place in western Loudoun County that would have bus stops are the Purcellville area. Is that correct?
That is correct.
No other part of western Loudoun County will have anything to bring them into the metro at all. Okay, so two questions. What is the plan for people that want to come from western Loudoun County? Will there be a parking right at the Purcellville stop? That's the first question. They can come to the Purcellville stop, or they would just drive all the way into the metro stops. And two, just as before I ask, will there be anything different that happens with our ADA bus services for western Loudoun County, or I guess for eastern Loudoun County, as that matters, as it relates to getting people to the metro stops?
Two-part question, and I'll start off and people can add on. So the bus stops will be in Purcellville, will be the furthest west that we have in the rural area.
Okay.
And that will include a stop at a park and ride lot. There will also be a park and ride lot at Harmony, and then in Leesburg as well.
Harmony Middle School? Harmony
At our
Church
current
Road?
park
Harmony
and
West?
ride lot,
I'm sorry?
At our current park and ride lot off of the Colonial Highway.
Oh, okay.
It's in the town of Hamilton.
Yeah.
Additionally, this is something that we are taking a look at as the U.S. Census tract data gets updated and where the urbanized area is. But currently, Virginia Regional Transit is providing essentially on-demand service for people in the rural area that don't have an existing bus route near them to get them to their destination.
Okay, so
if it originates or ends in the rural area.
And that hasn't really changed yet. Okay. All right, wonderful. And then the ADA question, but one more question. So, and this is a kind of an out there question. We were having a discussion at MBTA recently about how if you are going down 95, there's slug lanes. And has there been any thought to having anything that will resemble that in rural western Loudoun County that would get people to slugging for the point of getting you to the metro? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Slugging in general is an organic thing.
Yeah.
Really, the only thing that happens from a slug is from an organizational perspective
Got
is
it.
a
Yeah.
sign is put up is really what it is.
Okay, that's why I personally not getting in cars with strangers because my mom told me not to. So I've never quite understood that, but okay. And then the ADA question.
So if I'm to understand your question about the Western Line, and actually all of our parking and ride lights, the parking and ride lights themselves are ADA compliant already.
Okay.
All the buses are ADA accessible. The parking and ride lots are all ADA
So if
compliant.
we have somebody in rural Loudoun County that's not in Percival that wants to get to the metro who's an ADA citizen, what do they do? Same with just what they've been doing now?
Correct. They
Okay.
would be competing with the rest
Okay.
of the folks on the VRT service.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a request from a constituent who said he had planned his return to work on the July metro opening, and now that that's been slipped again, are there any contingency plans to begin the transit routes at a date certain without having a certain date for operation of the metro? I think the answer to the constituent is we would just incur costs and run empty buses if we wait, and we want to get a big bang to tie it with the opening of the metro.
Right.
It's just an educated guess.
Right. The point of having these routes, these newly designed routes, is that the Silver Line is operating. We will not transition to this new operation these new routes until such time as Silver Line starts its service.
Okay. I saw the $39 million project quote. Is that $39 million just for the transit project, or does that include the sidewalks and trails? It referred to the project in capital letters, and I didn't know what the project was.
I believe that's the VDOT project. Hang on just a second.
It pulled from a number of different accounts and established 2 new accounts.
Yes, sir. That is VDOT's metro area bike bed project.
I'm sorry, say it again?
In the fiscal impact section of the
Right.
board item on page 7,
Right.
that pertains to VDOT's metro area bike
Okay.
bed project.
Okay, got it. Any other questions on transit from anyone?
Chairman, I have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Glass.
Thank you. So have we thought at all about how shared mobility devices such as electric bikes and scooters might play in a transit around Metro? I know we have a pilot program for the devices, but I don't believe, do we have a company that has signed on into the program?
Actually, it's interesting that you asked that question. Our Transit Advisory Board has been looking into that option. They were curious about it, and we gave them information to contact other jurisdictions, and we had directed them to reach out to their respective board members and discuss that proposal with them, with each of you. The question is, are we ready for it? Because if we have missing links and that type of thing, and they're not linked together, it may not work yet. I do think it has a future, but right now may not be the right time.
That's very good. I didn't think of that. Thank you.
Any other questions on transit for item 2? Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. TLEC members, do we want to take a break for dinner, or do we want to roll? I think we can probably wrap up this next item in about 15 or 20 minutes. You need a break. Okay, we will take a 20-minute break for dinner. Thank you. In session, and the third item is an action item, and staff, you may proceed.
All right, thank you. All right, hello again, I'm Susan Glass here for the Route 15 South Safety and Operational Study. And with me at the table to my left is Paul Anderson. He is from AECom. He is the consultant that we've been working with on this project. And of course, Nancy Boyd, our interim director. We are here tonight with this item because the board on February 1st, 2022, at the business meeting, forwarded this study to the Transportation Land Use Committee for discussion and recommendations. Our presentation this evening will tell you about the study process and show you the recommended long-term improvements, which we have prioritized for your consideration. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Susan. And on behalf of AECom, I want to thank you for the chance that we had to work on this. It's been a great study, and it's been great working with the county on this. I understand that you guys were up last night late looking at a corridor study, so I'm going to move fairly quickly through the process and through some of the terms and the things that are there that you certainly know. We did follow a very similar scope template for going through that. So if I move quickly through that, certainly stop if you want to go deeper, but we'll tell you kind of how we got to where we are and refresh you on what we recommended and then answer your questions as to what's left. As with the other one, this was really kind of a three-legged stool. It began with technical analysis. We went out and did traffic data collection on various locations along the corridor, looking at speeds, looking at the geometry, field reviews, and all of what's physically out there. We had looked at crashes that were there as part of the technical analysis, so we would know what's going on. Then we talked to the public, and that was multiple times, a focus group committee, and we'll go deeper into that, as well as public meetings. But based on those two things, we developed concepts to deal with the places we saw either operational issues or safety hotspots. And that became an iterative process. We showed what we were thinking, got feedback, threw some of that out, and came up with some new ideas until we ultimately came down to two options and then recommendations and cost estimates. So the safety piece, certainly a critical part, and these are excerpts from the study. The part on the right is the heat map. The darker the color there indicates the more frequency of crashes. And not surprisingly, you see those clusters at the busier intersections, the two at the bottom in the blue being Route 50 and 15, and then Braddock Road, two of our more major hotspots. Further north, Limekill Road, Hogback Mountain, and Harmony Church Road. As not surprisingly, they're cluster where volumes are high, but there are a few others along the way that are a little more less volume focused and a bit more about conditions on the ground. To the left were the summary of the types of crashes we had, and 43% rear end crashes, roughly 17% animal crashes, and then fixed objects off the road, 13%. So about 3/4 of the crashes were either drivers leaving the roadway or suddenly coming up on traffic that was either slowed, stopped, or in the way, or unexpectedly encountering an animal. The remaining crashes, the angles, the head-ons, and side swipes and all that, while smaller in number, represent a lot of times the most severe crashes and the ones that sometimes we would need to focus on corrections that we can make because those are the ones that really lead to a lot of injuries and a lot of property damage as well. The 13, we started with 13 intersections along the corridor, and these are listed here from north to south. The Masons Lane, Woodley, Harmony Church, those were all the signalized intersections. We had the roundabouts at John Mosby and Hauser's Branch, and then the rest of the intersections there were along the way were unsignalized entrances and minor streets there. And we've color-coded it, level of service with the A, B, and C in green, considering about a good level of service and smooth operations. Into the D, you're starting to get a little bit more marginal, longer delay. And the E's and F's cry out for attention. Those are longer delay and queuing and everything there. So I don't think those locations will surprise much. The busiest intersection at 15 and 50 is currently operating at a marginal, right at F. It's quote a good F, but it's still it's the ones that have the most delay. And you might be surprised at New Road, there's a pretty low level of service. That is really more because of the higher traffic volumes and fewer gaps for that. It's a relatively minor in terms of volumes, but it's a lot of delay for those who try to use that. So that's the starting point for operations. Thanks. Then we took our data and our information, and with our sub RHI, they helped us conduct our first focus group. And Supervisor Kirshner there welcoming the group and getting us off to a wonderful start. We really had a robust and very good meeting there. Some exercises asking the focus group where they saw either concerns and or spots they wanted to preserve and so on. So that was a great kickoff, and within a couple weeks after that, face-to-face meetings were out the door. But we were able to keep going on and gather a lot of information through virtual public meetings, virtual focus group meetings, and online surveys, as well as engaging teleconferences with the partner agencies, both VDOT, neighboring jurisdictions, and like Prince William County, Leesburg, and then departments within within Loudon County. So they all fed into our thinking about the corridor and what the problems and what the fixes might be. Thanks. We summarized what we heard back from the various groups, and it was loud and clear that maintaining the rural beauty of this corridor was paramount to almost everyone we spoke to. To the left, so many of those rated that as their number one item, followed by safer access into and out off of Route 15 from driveways and intersections. Visibility for passing vehicles, those there are a few passing zones there, and there's a lot of frustration in certain locations and some spots where passing zones were marginal. And lastly was really reducing speed and enforcing speed limits. I don't think everyone, that we did have several people who thought speed was an issue, but it never rose to the level of those others. Okay. So based on that feedback and what we saw in the field, and we're out there before digging deep into long-term things, we looked for the low-hanging fruit. Things like trimming back vegetation that was creating existing compromised site distance, adding additional signage of upcoming intersections, certainly recommending that edge lines and center line rumble strips be maintained or installed with the paving schedule throughout the corridor where appropriate, and even eliminating one passing zone in the southern end where truck trailers and were an issue near Ohana, places where the normal passing zone was not quite adequate. So, and lastly, to make sure that we talked with the sheriff's group about the challenges of enforcing speed on this kind of roadway. Where can they stage and where can motorists pull off safely when we're going through that? We had some recommendations on that. All right. Then we dove into the concept development, and so to cover the 12-mile corridor, we divided it into 6 segments from south to north, A through F, and those limits are shown on the screen roughly where those broke out. And within each of those alternatives, we proposed alternatives at the spots that warranted any kind of work, and we'll go into what our concepts were now. And so we've put the recommendations here in priority order. These priorities are our study teams, and these are what we think gives the most bang for the buck, most benefit for the places that we saw as the most significant challenges in the corridor. And it was both from the public and from our data. Braddock Road, Old Carolina Road, that area was the top priority. A lot of traffic there and a lot of crashes, And this is, as you see on this, there's two intersections. The existing intersections are shown in pink. The one to the right being Braddock Road, and the one to the left being Old Carolina. We are proposing dealing with both of those by combining them into a single roundabout. And roundabout is a big investment, and it slows traffic, and we thought that we should not be trying to cure one or the other of those known conditions. So it will also be a way that we can stage and keep the intersections operating some during construction. This is a significant project. It will provide the benefit of certainly slowing vehicles down in an area where sight distance is a bit of a challenge, and certainly add safety and some much needed level of service to the side streets in these areas that carry a lot of traffic. This intersection, we'll talk a bit more about it, but this one already has programming for future work and studies underway to advance it to the next level of design. $14.5 million was our estimate on that. Number two is a roundabout at Hogback Mountain Road. This is a spot where traffic fluctuates pretty significantly at different times of day. But the geometry of the road coming over a crest and also occurring south of where the real friction is there, speeds get up pretty high, and there have been a number of significant crashes there. Also an issue with weekend traffic and church traffic and those kind of things. So we recommended a single lane roundabout be conducted here. It would primarily through traffic would really just slow down. Very rarely be required to stop, but would get everybody down to about a 20-mile-an-hour speed and significantly improve access both to Hogback Mountain Road, the wineries there, and to the church to the south. So that's our second priority. Similar thoughts to the south, Limekiln Road. That's also a major feeder route to a large area of the county. Also has some geometric issues on the approach from the north, both a curve and a steep slope, and traffic humming along pretty well through there. It's a place where we feel a roundabout here gives you a couple of advantages. When coupled with the one at Hogback Mountain Road, you create a bit of a traffic calmed zone between those two, and that covers Oatlands, little Oatlands, and that segment where shoulders are narrow and where there's not a lot of room to do much to the corridor. Our fourth priority, this one is one that's probably part of what we're here tonight to talk about, because it is a recommendation for the creation of turn lanes that essentially feed a private property. We are not proposing them because we are looking to create some advantages for the business. It certainly has that effect, but more to keep traffic moving at a steady pace along Route 15 to avoid people coming up suddenly on stops, especially since the traffic volumes in the area can fluctuate pretty wildly depending on a sunny weekend versus a mid-morning. There's a very big difference in what you might encounter. Creates some issues. Next. This is the busiest intersection in the corridor, probably the most studied and the most worked on, revised through the years. Most of you probably know better than I that when this was a signalized intersection, there were horrific backups all the time through there. So the solution of the 3 roundabout network that's close by there unlocked that intersection, and has also become, I think, very popular with all the people that we talked with. I think came to appreciate and prefer roundabouts in this county. I think through some of this. While this was originally proposed and built as a 2-lane roundabout with higher capacity and all that, that was a little much maybe out of the gate. People had issues with it, so it was dialed back to a single-lane roundabout. What we're showing here is that in the future, 2040, we're projecting traffic at the southern end of the corridor starts to grow, And there may be a time when this needs to be converted back to a 2-lane roundabout. And primarily, the green there is the bypass lanes that would handle the heavy movements from west, which would be Middleburg up to the north and to the left, from west to south, and also from east to south, and then going westbound to northbound at the roundabout Meadows and at the farm market. So the other movements there are lower volume and don't warrant widening. But that's about the best thing that you can do, I think, at this location to get extra capacity without going to a very elaborate or grade separated kind of thing. So then in similar logic and issues there, the accompanying Hauser's Branch Drive roundabout, we're proposing a separated bypass channeled lane that allows southbound traffic to flow through without intersecting or having conflicts with the rest of the roundabout traffic. And similarly, a right turn channelized zone there for the morning traffic, the heavy movements from Prince William up north and to the east. So those, I think, will get the busiest intersections handled at capacity. Being roundabouts, they have accidents, but not near the severity that some of the other intersections have. So we recommend those further down the road. And then this from New Road, Mountain Road, that's a very minor looking road, very narrow gravel roads. But if you pull in there and try to get onto the road, the number of gaps that are there and all mean a lot of delays. Much worse, in 2040, as this part of the county again has the most development coming, and so we put turn lanes on the main line to give the turning vehicles a chance to get out of the way and normalize traffic and keep it moving on the main line, as well as right turn lanes to allow the side streets to make rights when they get that chance. This can be upgraded relatively easily. This would be an interim step to if this ever needed to be signalized. The lane work here is most of that, and the rest would be just installing the equipment. We're not recommending this as a higher priority because we think there's going to be effects of the improvement at Braddock Road and Old Carolina Road will provide a very high efficiency, very comfortable, very safe alternative to vehicles coming up here and trying to make a left turn across all the traffic that's here today. They still will function likely as right in, right outs for a lot of the people, but we believe that once that other is constructed, the need to use this for try to make left turns goes way down. Lastly, a rather small improvement at Harmony Church Road, the little yellow lane, we're creating a short left turn lane for traffic heading from Route 15 north, turning left, and then planning to turn left at Mount Gilead Road. As it stands now, someone pulling up there and doing that could suddenly stop and create friction and unnecessary congestion at that intersection. So this won't have major safety implications because the speeds generally are fairly low, but it could definitely help with the flow of traffic and the nuisance factor and prevent some crashes there. So those are the recommendations we come away with for improvements to the road. You see the first 6 are here. We have 2 more on the next page as to the range. Certainly the most consequential and the most expensive was the Braddock Road, but down to a relatively small left turn lane on the other. So that's it. And Susan, you had some overall issues I think we wanted to mention, and then we'll answer questions.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out in the staff report, there are some issues that are noted. The first one with the speed limit reduction, we had heard from the public that they thought we could wave a magic wand and reduce the speed limit from 55 to 45 miles an hour. The county does not have jurisdiction to do that. An engineering study would be needed to take that action. Speed cameras, that was another idea that the public had because I think some of them have been over to Maryland and have seen how effective those speed cameras are in terms of getting people to slow down. The state Code of Virginia allows photo enforcement of speed in school zones and in construction zones. The county has not yet enacted an ordinance to be able to do that, and the state code itself does not allow photo enforcement outside those areas. Traffic calming, that was another thing that we heard from the public quite a bit, and typically that is not something that would be intended for a high-speed, high-volume roadway such as Route 15 South. Shared use path, while we were working on this study, we did explore the public's preference for which side of the road they would like a future shared use path to be located. This kind of follows with Supervisor Turner's question from the earlier item. The countywide transportation plan calls for one shared use path to be located alongside Route 15. It doesn't say which side of the road it should be located on. So we did take the opportunity. The preference would be for it to be on the east side. We are not proposing to have a shared use path constructed as a standalone project. DTCI, my colleagues, are working on a follow-up item to the sidewalk and trail program that is to prioritize the rural segments, and that will be coming to you all by the end of the year, I believe. Shoulders. This section of Route 15, similar to Route 15 North, has really inadequate shoulders. While the public expressed a preference for having those shoulders improved, they may not have been aware that the VDOT's standard shoulders are 10 to 14 foot of shoulders with an 8-foot wide pavement. So we are not suggesting to go do a corridor-wide shoulder upgrade anywhere where there are improvements that are selected to be advanced. They would have to comply with VDOT's current regulations, and those shoulders would be provided in those locations. Design considerations, the Route 15, this section is part of the journey through hallowed ground, and we'd need to have context-sensitive design carried into this segment for whatever improvements are picked up. Paul touched a little bit on the funding of turn lanes into private properties. That winery down there was developed. The county's regulations did not require transportation improvements for rural-based businesses. The Bi-County Parkway is listed here because that is a roadway in Loudon County that's known as North Star Boulevard, and it's intended to connect into Prince William County in a road that would then tie into the interchange at Prince William County Parkway and Route 66. The issue is that Prince William County has taken it off of their version of the countywide transportation plan, which is called the Thoroughfare Plan. The Bi-County Parkway is a parallel road to Route 15 and would reduce the traffic on Route 15. Finally, the differences between a study and a design. Although the concepts that were shown on this presentation and in our study appear like they're a plan, it's basically not an engineered plan. It's using the aerial imagery and some line work, but it's not an engineered plan. So with that, we're here for any questions, comments that you all have.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. That was a good presentation. Do we want to make a motion and talk with an emotion, or do we have questions? We can ask questions if you
I have a few questions.
Okay, let's do some questions. Supervisor Glass.
Okay, thank you. Does Route 15, well, being at a federal highway, does that help at all with getting federal funding for projects like this?
So it is part of the national highway system, but the ability to get funding, it kind of depends for federal funding on the federal grant program and what the criteria that they've set up. So I wouldn't say per se that it does. It really just depends on the improvement that we're considering and whether that fits into the criteria of those grant programs.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't hurt, but we don't really get funding that way for our improvements routinely. But we do look for those opportunities when we can.
Okay, thank you. And this may be a question to my colleagues here. Is it possible that we could have large corridor safety studies come to TLUC for a review before going to the full board, so that we don't have such long discussions at the full board?
We're doing
I
right
think
now.
last
I think
night.
that's what we do.
We're doing right now.
I think the safety studies always come to us first.
They do?
I think. Haven't they come to us before? in the past?
No, sir.
Nine.
Our direction, well, perhaps Mr. Hemstreet should
Hemstreet.
answer that question.
So the process is that unless we have direction from the board, they will come to the board first. If the board would like to have TLUC take a look at the corridor study, then typically just a board member would make a motion to send it to TLUC, and then we would place it on the next available TLUC agenda.
Okay. Okay.
But it's interesting to note it for future reference. I mean, we can do that. Any one of us can make that motion from the board anytime.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Gertrude.
Thank you. I actually had a few questions, and then I had a bunch more. First one is, the first paragraph is, and I remember this, and I was trying to remember why. You originally brought this to the board, the full board, with the recommendation of adopting the endorsements, and there was an alternative motion passed and pushed back to TLUC. Has anything happened between now and then?
No, are you inquiring about the delay between the February 1st meeting and today? Is that
Yes.
what you're inquiring?
Yeah.
Well, we did have some scheduling issues in getting to the
And I'm not
TLUC
upset with you.
meeting.
I just, it got pushed back to TLUC for a reason. And I remember I was the only one that voted against it. Mr. Turner wasn't present, and I can't remember why.
It was very late at night. That may have been part of the reason.
I couldn't understand why it got pushed back at that
My
time.
recollection is Supervisor Letourneau was raising some issues.
Right. Do we know what those
and
issues
we-
are?
I'm sorry, I
It's
don't
okay.
know what his
It's okay.
issues were, but.
I mean, I've looked at this item a number of times now, and this is not the first time, because I remember looking at it when we were at the full board, and I'm like, this is all great stuff. I have a few questions, but, because I've looked at it a little more thoroughly.
And-
But I just
and
didn't
then
know
it-
if this board, Mr. Turner wasn't there, so he can't speak to it. He lucked out because he was absent.
Yes, he had left the
Right.
meeting that evening, and there was one month where there was no TLUC meeting, and then there was another month where
Right.
a
Well, and I'm not
TLUC
upset
meeting
about
was
that. I
devoted to another topic, so it took us a little while to get on the schedule.
I just want to point out for the other board members who voted to put it back here, I'm not sure why we're here. So hopefully we have something to talk about other than, oh, let's just adopt the motion because we kind of wasted 5 months doing this. The couple other questions. One thing that I did notice is we have a lot of accidents in a couple of different places. And if you can pull up that, but around the 50 and 15 area, which we all know about, and then around the Harmony Church area. I think those are the highest intensity accident areas up and down the corridor. Now, by the way, it's a great picture of me. I'm glad you put me up. So my question is, we put these triple roundabout. Are we just having more accidents there because there's more people, or are there really ongoing problems here?
Those are proportionate to the volumes that go through it. As the intersection, gets more traffic going through it.
Okay.
The number of accidents goes up proportionally.
So it's not like we made a mistake by putting these roundabouts in per se. It's just we got a lot of volume. You're naturally going to have more accidents.
Absolutely, that's a function of it, and I would say that the severity, even this is showing just the number of accidents. When you look at severity of crashes, and we have some figures about that, roundabouts bring down the severity of the accidents significantly. The number of fatalities and serious injuries go way down. So, yeah, you don't get rid of all of the crashes, but they become fender benders, some rear ends and things that versus side angle and head-ons and those kinds of things.
I'm out of time, but I do have further questions.
Chair Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the chart on page 6 is fascinating to me. I just did not expect that. Can you give me some information on this chart? Like how many people were in this study? And these people, whenever people do this, they're self-selected, so they come from, the same, but I'm almost wondering, you probably don't know this, like, was it more PEC people, was it more who? Because this is a really interesting chart. I mean, they basically said more than anything else, more than being safe, more than reducing speeds, more than enforcing speed limits, more than reducing accidents, they want to maintain the rural beauty of the corridor. How many people participated in this study? Do we have a number?
I can find it. This chart came out of the initial public input meeting and the survey that was conducted in conjunction with that. And that effort was really intended to find out what it is what are the issues along the corridor?
Right. Susan, while you're looking for that number, I'm going to ask a couple more questions. On page 12, I completely agree that spending the $4.2 million that would basically benefit a private business is not a great idea. I completely agree with that. Isn't that basically the same thing though when you go to page 10 on D1? Aren't we for the most part benefiting a private business right here? Isn't there a winery here as well?
There is a winery there, and that constitutes a fair amount of the traffic that's there in the situations. But there are other properties along that is a county road, and it connects to a larger area. It is not a dead end strictly
just for the
there,
purposes
but it certainly
of that business.
will. It's not just for that business, and it is a road that I think connects to a much larger area than is necessarily.
That absolutely makes sense. And then lastly, I would say on page 13, first of all, I also think that the 3 roundabouts is some kind of genius. I don't know what engineer figures out to do that, but it works very, very well. I don't imagine we're going to have a lot more traffic on that road. We're not going to have a lot more development on that road. Now, there may be development that comes in from Prince William County, but possibly. But knowing the zoning we're looking at today and the fact that we're not going to be doing anything different, I don't think we're going to ever need to go to 2 roundabouts because I don't think the traffic on that road is going to increase significantly.
And we've pulled this down a bit. While the volumes that are there would make you say, well, that should be a higher priority. We're thinking out to 2040 is when the growth on 50 and south and east of 15 and south of 50. That's where the growth area in this whole corridor is the highest. And so the model that we use, the county planning model that we used to do the future forecasts, show the traffic growing south of Route 50, almost no real growth north of Route 50. But that does play into both Hauser's Branch and into this roundabout. So that's where, if you see growth in the future, 2040 in this corridor, almost all of it is at this roundabout and south. So
I have to see this.
So now it may not come about, and with new travel patterns and all of that stuff, that's a wait and see. So we don't have this at the top of our list, even though it's the highest volume location, because I think there's a bit of wait and see. When you get to that point, if you start seeing queuing going and all that, this is what we think the answer is to improving that if and when the volumes rise to where that becomes the delays become untenable and you need the relief.
Thank you. Thanks for all the work on this. I think this is actually a pretty fascinating presentation. Actually, thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
Did you get that?
Yes, I did, and I do want to just point out here on this slide, there's on the top left-hand side of the roundabout is a white plan that's kind of overlaid here. That is the future Aldi Fire Station. The site plan. That's what that represents.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So Chair Randall, going back to your question on the,
Yep, that one.
on this graphic here, this did come from our initial public input, and it was collected during the period of July 13th through August 14th, 2020. It was a virtual meeting and online survey. There were 110 responses that were collected.
110. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The level of service or Houses Branch Drive roundabout is level of service A and C and ranked number 1 in the intersection study. What's the integration between the intersection study and these route corridor safety studies?
That's it. That was the existing conditions. That's the volumes that were out there in the September of 2019. What we were seeing going on there, the volumes that were observed, and then we plugged those into the Synchro software to see what was the level of service that is there. So that is based on the volumes that were in place when we started the study. And you see we had 3 periods, AM, PM, and Saturdays. The Saturdays in general were not worth looking at. We focused on AM and PM. But the Hauser's branch, it doesn't get near the volume that the 50 one gets. So you see it operates better than the 50 and 15 does. It gets a fair amount of northbound to eastbound in the morning, and then the consequential, it's the westbound to southbound pattern in the evening. But the Route 50 and 15 both have a lot of through volume, a lot of regional traffic, and so that one gets the brunt of it, even though the other two relieve that roundabout considerably.
Okay, and then...
Can I ask a question? Supervisor Turner, were you asking about the county's intersection improvement program?
Yes,
And, okay.
but that was a good answer, but also, that's, my next thing is, how do they react? So are we going to grab money out of the intersection improvement program to pay for these specific projects if we approve these? How does that work? What's that interaction?
So the intersection improvement program is also a prioritized program. And so if there's an intersection, and what I don't know the answer to is whether any of these and where these fall on that program, but to the extent that they fall within the prioritized list, because there's a certain number that we go, typically about 12 every year, that we look for as part of the CIP process to fund. And so as we work our way down the list for these intersections that coincide with that list, we'll chip away at it.
Okay, so when I think I want to kind of explore the mirror image of what would happen there. So let's say we approve this study and we select projects each year, go separately into the CIP as part of this study. But we also select 12 projects out of the intersection program to move into the CIP every year, if I heard you, or to actually fund them out of that pot of money, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are they talking to each other? What if we suddenly we decide we're going to fix an intersection, which we now just approved on this study to go into the CIP separately? Who gets priority? Where does the money come from? Do we talk about that and not put it in the CIP program because we've said it's clearly going to get funded out of the intersection program this year and go on to the next priority?
We would have that discussion as part of the CIP development process.
All right. Really, I got a second. Let's go around again. Supervisor Glass? No?
I think Mr. Hemstreet
Oh.
was going to add some addition.
Yeah.
I do have questions, but do you want to call on him first?
Yeah, Mr. Hemstreet, go ahead.
I was going to answer the budget question, but
Sure.
if you're satisfied with Nancy's response, then I don't need to.
Yeah, I think it was, we'll talk about it at the time. Somebody in DTCI will note the fact that it's in 2 places at once and which one's going to take priority, I assume.
Yes, although we have a pretty elaborate process at the staff level. What we will do is bring a discussion to the Finance Committee and lay out the funding elements or the projects, and then gain priorities from finance in terms of how the CIP or capital budget should come together, particularly when we have new elements that are introduced into the listing of projects.
Okay, thank you.
And is that kind of a follow-up on that, or whomever wants to answer it, is that process for the intersection fund kind of programmed out 6 years already?
We do have a prioritized list, so you can see where everything falls.
So in large part, these, unless we at the finance kick something out, put some, we're looking at these no earlier than 7, 8 years from now.
So it
Getting this
depends. I
funded.
I think one of the questions that the staff and I'll have to evaluate, and then depending on how that evaluation goes, potentially bring it to finance, is should these intersections, if they're adopted by the board, be rolled into the intersection improvement program?
Right.
If the answer to that is yes, then these then would be entered and then reprioritized within the rest of the intersections that are in the county. Some may actually be in the program already. We would have to go and double check that
Fair enough.
and see where they are. Because if they've got a high enough rating,
Crash, yeah.
they could already be in the program. We'd have to check
Yeah.
that.
Do we know? do we
Certainly
have
the case with Braddock Road is one
already
that's in
in
there.
there,
Yeah,
yep.
that's already there.
Okay. That's actually very, very helpful. Thank you. And I would like to know if there are any more in the program, if you maybe check that at some point. I don't need to know right now, but I had a couple follow-up. I noticed Harmony Church improvements are literally the least expensive on your list of 8. But I also noticed that area was actually one of the highest crash volumes. So, and I'm very familiar with that area. I come out of there all the time. I guess my question was, folks turning on to Mount Gilead, is that why most of the crashes are happening? Or is it just because there's a stoplight and there's rear end? Can you give me?
The latter. I think they're not particularly that every time it's like bumper cars, anything like that. That's more of an observation of what is very likely happening occasionally. I think rear ends, because the light changed and someone's not paying attention predominantly.
And so-
the kinds of crashes are there. So
And is that one of the reasons that was kicked all the way to the bottom versus some of the others? Is because there's really you can't really fix for stupid, maybe? Or
to
inattention?
some degree, it's a very specific fix to a part of the problems that happen there. It won't flip that, knock 50% of the crashes out by any means. But it seemed like a logical thing to from us to say, you've got heavy volumes. When you give it green, let's make sure those drivers have the expectation they're going to accelerate and go on through.
Was there a reason? I think I remember, because I was on a number of the outreach calls on a number of occasions. Not all of them, obviously, but several. Yeah. Was there a talk about putting a roundabout in there? Was there a reason we kept the light? Was there analysis done there?
That's a great question. That was a suggestion that came up from the focus group. Some people thought, hey, what about a roundabout at this intersection? And based on what we saw from an operational standpoint, that this is, of all the places we were looking, this wasn't an intersection that was broken in terms of level of service or anything.
Right.
And it would involve, I think, some pretty considerable land use questions. We did take a look at that and say that, it would be feasible to create a 5-legged roundabout that would be an extensive engineering job because of Sickling Creek there, and also the properties there, the utilities. It would be quite a project, and we felt that would be something to be explored as part of a bigger land use kind of issue. To go and do that on its own, the benefits seem pretty low.
Fair enough.
Because it's already signalized and working, relatively well compared to the others.
Yeah, I kind of have a little bit of tendency to agree with you on that. Chair Randall brought up the question, I have 20 seconds, about which private entrance were we talking about, Ben? Which one, the winery or Goombro? Okay, so I did have a follow-up question concerning her concerns on that. To me, I mean, I appreciate that it does benefit them, but it also benefits the safety of the folks on the road. Because people stop to turn in there, and they're going to stop to turn in there anyway, and then and there's no place to get around. So the idea would be to put turn lanes out there. So I don't know, just as a thought, I understand it benefits them. They have an establishment. Perhaps if there was some sort of rezone, we could have demanded some sort of proffer to put that in. But at this point now, it's become a safety issue. So I would have a tendency to, that's just my thoughts, given your comments. And I had one other. Oh, I'm out of time. I'm sorry. I think I have most of my questions answered. I think everybody else is done.
Chair Randall, anything? Okay. Are you going to have any more questions?
I did have one, I had two questions
Go
that
ahead.
are short.
Go ahead with your.
Okay. Just on, you mentioned, you talked about the shoulders. There was some of the recommended. Obviously, we're not looking at that now. Was it my understanding that you talked about maybe shoulders in the future in some areas of this corridor?
The requirement, this being a VDOT road, if we do improvements such as turn lanes, some of the roundabout approaches and those kind of things, the assumption that we have is that would require meeting the standards for the shoulders in those locations where you make changes. Yeah.
So there will be places for more law enforcement as well, and fire trucks and all that good stuff. Not everywhere, but especially enforcement. I mean, I think that's important. That's something we found in North 15, which is nearly impossible. We're working on right now, but
yes, that's true. And we think that in general on the corridor, one idea that I think makes sense for providing a little more pull-off place. The sheriff's office seemed to feel there were enough places they knew along the way that they could stage their vehicles. What's lacking somewhat is the safer place for the person that's being pulled over to slow down and feel like, okay, I'm safe, I'm pulling here and not stopping the road. And I believe at some of the larger, at the intersections or minor roads, as we're working along the way there, a little bit of widening or approach and some shoulder improvements in those locations could serve double duty as a de facto deceleration lane / pull-off area that would benefit everyone making those turns. It's not, again, worth, I think, going out there and doing those projects just for that purpose, but it would have an everyday benefit for anyone pulling off the road, being able to do more of that deceleration out of the lane of traffic. And the side benefit would be, it would be a pretty convenient place for someone who's being pulled over to feel like I can safely stop here. So that's throughout the corridors. You look at certain intersections and case by case, being on the lookout for a little bit of gravel, a little widening spot locations could go a long way towards improving that.
So and then finally, the only light then will be between Leesburg and I guess 15 and beyond, or 50 and beyond, will be there at Harmony Church. Is that correct? All lights will be removed.
That's correct.
It's going to be a great corridor. It's going to look really good. It's going to meet what I think people want. I appreciate it. People are going to want to come to Loudon.
Really quick, one last question. At about $4 million a pop minimum, roundabouts are certainly the answer. I think they're very effective. And my question was going to be, is there a lesser satisfactory and sufficient answer? And my bet is your answer is going to be maybe today, but not by 2040. Is that reasonable?
Lesser something
turn
like
lanes,
a roundabout that
dedicated turn lanes, any other lesser option besides a roundabout?
Turn lanes that can provide a benefit certainly for that. There's some of the rear ends and those things, and the new road, Old Mountain Road, is a good example of how you could treat things along the way. Our thinking was that you don't get any speed reduction there, and you get very little benefit to the side streets for getting on and off. It would help Route 15, but that's about all it would help, and it would not really slow anything down. Where the big benefit the roundabout gives you is that the side streets all of a sudden now get some priority, and everybody cools their jets for a little bit, if you will, while they come in and come out of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. I really appreciate the presentation. I don't think you might want to hang around to see if we have questions during the vote, but I want to take a quick straw poll rather than get into the parliamentary double loop of an amendment to a motion. My sense is we all agree fundamentally with the list. There is some controversy around the improvements, the $4 million, 4.2 million improvements to the winery. Do we want to take that out, or do we want to include it in the motion?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if I have disagreements. I don't know. I think Mr. Kirshner has a good point. If the traffic, even if it benefits the winery, if it's causing a safety issue, we have to address it. That's my question. If it's a queue and everyone's turning to the winery, but it's not causing a safety issue, whatever. But if it's causing a safety issue, not a congestion issue, but an actual safety issue, that's what I'd like. That's a different issue.
Yeah, the crashes there is not, there's a bit of a hot spot. If you see, that's kind of a lukewarm spot there that some of the crashes are there. There are crashes at that location, and but there's also anecdotally the times that these occur and the near misses, and then all of a sudden the delay of a couple people are waiting. Everybody on Route 15 has to stop. There's no traffic moving through at those times when traffic is heavy. So it really, even if it doesn't create extensive crash frequency on par with the other major intersections there, it is causing 55-mile-an-hour traffic to come to a sudden stop and wait until you get in there. So it's more of an operations than safety improvement there. Of trying to keep this two-lane road in general, 2 lanes, but 2 lanes that are moving more so than we had horrific crash experience.
Happy to have that discussion within the motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Kirshen, do you have a motion?
I move the Transportation Land Use Committee recommend that the Board of Supervisors endorse all recommended long-term improvement priorities that are listed in the table on page 18 of the June 2022, a lot of twos in there, TLUC meeting action item for future planning and implementation.
I'll take that second.
Great.
Comments?
Yeah, I appreciate the work. I think this is really well laid out. It was easy to understand, and I think that's for our benefit, as busy as our schedules are. We don't eat, live, and breathe this, but we do breathe it a lot, and you made it very easy to understand, and I appreciate that in terms of the way this is. So whoever put the report together, kudos to you and all the work. Thank you. I mean, to address kind of the one issue that was brought up by the chair, I do think that people are going to be turning into this establishment regardless. So I don't know if it benefits the safety of the people going up and down the corridor. I don't think more people are going to the establishment versus not going to establishment, whether these improvements are made. So I think if there were to be any changes or friendlies to this, maybe you, because it is a $4 million process or whatever it was, maybe you bump it to the bottom of the list so it's the last one to get funded perhaps. But I still think that staff has done a pretty good job kind of prioritizing. I'm happy with it. They know this far better than we do, and had a lot of questions that you answered really, really well. And I think I'm envisioning the whole corridor and how it's going to look, and other corridors. That we just went over Route 9, and I think this is going to be kind of the southern entrance into Loudon, and we're going to get a report soon from Visit Loudon on the awesome numbers that we're getting in terms of tourism to Western Loudon. I think this will just be one of those tremendous, hey, let's drive up to Western Loudon. We're going to see kind of these old roads and roundabouts and keep the character of it. I think it'll just enhance what we already have here. So thanks for your hard work, and I hope members of this committee will support this.
And I would agree with all that. It's a safety and operational study, and so if the object is a safety and operational analysis of the corridor, then the winery has to be in play, and then you have to recommend fixes for safety and operational reasons both. And the collateral effect, whether it's intended or not, is that we probably help a business. But safety and operational wise, I think it's relevant. So I'm more than happy to support it.
My light was on before you started talking, I promise.
I went out of turn.
It was on. I promise. I promise it was on. He does. This issue is not only is it not a hill I'm going to die on, it's not even a hill I'm going to walk up, right? I'm really not. It's fine. I like Mr. Kirshen's idea, but I always think it's hard because it's hard to separate safety from congestion. Yeah. They really are kind of go hand in hand to a large degree. And I learned that during the Route 15 study, and to try to separate the two is almost impossible. And so this is not an issue for me. And I do like Mr. Kirshen's idea of where we would score it and when we would address it, but I'm fine.
And thank you, staff, for your hard work. I really appreciate all that you do, and I will support this. And I would also agree with Chair Randall and Supervisor Kirshner on if you want to bump this down at another level and have the turn lanes at the winery, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Closing comments? Be that as it may, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion will pass 401. Thank you very much, staff. We appreciate it. Thank you, staff. We are adjourned.
Thank you.